Welcome to another exciting episode of Marvelous Videos. I'm your host, Tia Aya. Supernatural zombie horror and demonic enzyme from REC Explained. REC is a Spanish found footage horror film created and directed by Jaume and Paco Plaza that was released in 2007. It made its debut during the peak of the found footage frenzy, starting with 1999's Blair Witch Project. It felt that if a film wasn't in the found footage format, it wasn't a horror picture. Even at that time, the film managed to stand out from the crowd, garnering international notice, generating a slew of sequels, and the inevitable inferior American remake, a reporter and her cameraman accompanying a crew of firefighters on an emergency call to an apartment complex in the film. After an infection rapidly spreads inside the facility, the situation soon worsens, with the building being sealed up while its people are required to follow a rigorous quarantine. Both commercially and critically, the picture was a smash hit. In present times, this is regarded as one of the genre's early triumphs as well as one of the best. REC was ranked number 60 in Time Out's list of the top 100 best horror films of all time. In fact, REC's avalanche of horrors moved at lightning speed, giving viewers little time to catch their breath. More impressively, Balagueró and Plaza saved the best for last, concluding the documentary with such a stunning scene that it became instantly famous. Today we are taking a look at this terrifying horror movie that is bound to leave you terrified. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Whatever you witness, never stop recording. REC 2007. The story revolves around Angela, a TV reporter, and Pablo, her cameraman, as they follow a group of local firefighters. Angela's face appears bored during the interviews. She is clearly disappointed in their assignment and impatient for anything to happen. She keeps hoping for the alarm will go off, and of course it happens, and she and Pablo, along with fireman Manu, race to an apartment building. Initially, the directors considered having a TV camera team follow certain police officers. They chose firemen instead because they are more popular and accepted by the general population, especially in the aftermath of 9/11. This film was shot in the Sedemataxa building, Rambla de Catalunya 34 in Barcelona's Example area. After the film's success, it was attacked by a mob of teenagers in 2007. The apartment saw thousands of tourists and fans gather around what we had now become a cinematic monument. All the locations are real and no sets were made. In fact, to make it all even more real when it came to casting, the directors purposefully chose unknown individuals to help make the play more genuine, as well as performers who were adept at improvisation. When they arrive, all the occupants are gathered in the stairs, confused about what's going on and agitated by shouts from one of their neighbors. An elderly woman in an apartment appears to have gone insane, becoming violently hostile and attacking a police officer, prompting Angela and the others to flee. As they return to the bottom floor, they discover that the health department has sealed the entrances and quarantined the building, keeping everyone within an unknown infection. The military arrives, and it's clear that what's happening to them was definitely not a common incident. Alex, who remained upstairs with the old woman, is thrown over the staircase railing and seriously injured as people begin to panic. Miss Izquierdo then murders a girl, forcing the surviving cop, Sergio, to shoot her. What follows is a frantic scene in which the contained video crew, civil workers, and building attendants gradually realize that they are stuck in the building with deranged but mostly infected lunatics. When they bite, the infection spreads and the remaining few have to deal with additional infected. It's a standard zombie situation, but this time it's confined to 3 flights of tiny staircases and dark apartments. The photographer sprints around, shaking the camera and using it to protect his face during attacks. When an infected resident strikes the microphone or the camera is dropped entirely, the sound pings out and we're left watching from an angle that shows us close to nothing. Angela and Pablo then begin their interviews with the residents. Jennifer, a sickly small child, is one of the interviewers. Her mother, Marie Carmen, claims that she has tonsillitis and that her dog Max is also sick and being treated at the vet. A hazmat suit-clad health inspector arrives and attempts to care for the injured and treat them until they become unusually violent. After locking the injured in the building's textile warehouse, the health inspector reveals that they are sick with a virus comparable to rabies, and that the disease was traced back to a dog in the apartment complex, and Angela understands it must be Max. As this realization comes to light and they start questioning both Jennifer and her mother, things take a drastic turn. All of a sudden, Jennifer turns, bites her mother's face, and flees upstairs when the residents confront Mary Carmen. Sergio binds Mary Carmen to the steps and follows Manu and Pablo upstairs.
What the hell was that? What was that?
They locate Jennifer, but she bites Sergio, who orders the others to leave them alone. Manu and Pablo discover the surviving occupants fleeing upstairs after the infected in the warehouse had smashed the door. The rest of the apartment's tenants are gradually bitten and infected, leaving almost all the residents in a murderous zombie-like state. The remaining party searches for a key that will open a basement entrance, allowing them to escape the quarantine undetected. However, in the process of getting there, the number of survivors reduces to 3, Angela, Pablo, and Manu. When Manu is bitten and infected and their way downstairs is blocked by a swarm of ravenous tenants, Angela and Pablo take refuge in the only place remaining, the empty, ominous penthouse. If things weren't already bleak, things are about to get 100 times worse.
Come on. Come on. Let me see.
They discover news clippings on the walls and a tape recording that reveals the penthouse owner to be a Vatican agent. TRISTANA MEDEIROS, a demonically possessed girl, charged him with isolating her with an infected enzyme. During the treatment of TRISTANA, the enzyme altered it and became infectious instead. The Vatican agent then shuts off Tristan's penthouse and left her to die. In fact, this is credited with being one of the primary influences on the first-person survival horror game Outlast 2013. The game investigates the boundaries between science and religion in the same way as the RET series does with medical science, viruses, and possession. The game's POV was also influenced by the shaky found film aesthetic employed in RET. They explore the bizarre material in the penthouse. The attic door swings open as the cause of the disease is revealed. Pablo investigates with the camera, but an infected child knocks it to the floor, breaking the camera's light in the process. It leaves Angela and Pablo in full darkness until Pablo discovers the camera's night vision setting. Pablo notices a now very malnourished Tristana roaming around the room hunting for food, while attempting to soothe a scared Angela. As the gaunt Tristana knocks around the place, he whispers to Angela to be quiet. Pablo tries to steer them away from Tristana, but they run into something that alerts her of their presence. Tristana assaults Pablo, pummeling him to death and causing damage to the camera. It lands on the floor, capturing a terrified Angela as she fumbles around on the floor, blindly looking for safety. When she sees Tristana leaning over Pablo's body, she drops the camera again. The camera is then pointed at Angela as she belly crawls towards it, only to be taken away into the darkness. The final shot of our protagonist being dragged away into the darkness creates an indelible memory, in both a final scare and a fitting finale rolled into one. The filmmakers save explanations regarding the epidemic until the conclusion, which enhances the emotional response of Tristana's arrival. With Angela trapped in a position with no way out, this final make of the most logical sense. That, however, doesn't make the abruptness any less shocking. REC has one of the most amazing payoffs in horror. On a narrative level, it neatly wraps things up while keeping the film's severe, nihilistic tone. Visually, the excellent stage ensures that Tristana's quick on-screen appearances does the most shock-induced damage imaginable. Above all, with the use of the recovered film, Balagueró and Plaza immerse the audience in this terrifying experience. REC is the apex of found footage horror because it manipulates two key film tools, sight and sound, to instill anxiety and fear in the audience. Demonic enzyme, the virus that affects the human mind, explained. As the action unravels, things look more and more like a zombie infection. I mean, it only makes sense that there's a virus going around that has passed on through biting others, which makes them go into a ravenous frenzy. However, this was not the case. Turns out that the cause behind the disaster was actually a demonic enzyme that the Vatican had discovered and then entrusted a priest to treat it. Why they didn't think that it was a good idea to take it to a doctor or a pathologist is beyond me. But we'll take that in our own stride. The virus began spreading mostly because the infected biting the others, but blood, saliva, and all kinds of bloody bodily fluids were also contagious. We also realize midway that a dog named Max was probably the first carrier of this mutagenic disease, and the most probable way of that happening was that rats and mice had infested the building who carried the infection from the penthouse all the way to Max. The Vatican priest was also experimenting on the rats and mice with the virus. This also pointed to the first human to be infected being a little girl named Jennifer, who was Max's owner. This brought up a new fact about the virus, which was the reaction times post-infection was not the same for everyone. If an infected person bites someone, the time of the reaction varies on the victim's blood type, which apparently has something to do with a body's innate immunity. The approximate time of reaction in children is longer than that in any diseased adult. Jennifer only suffered symptoms like tonsillitis, according to her mother. We also learn that the virus can also transverse species boundaries. Jennifer's dog was infected in the first film and caused havoc in a veterinary facility. This points to the fact that the virus might have been a mammalian virus instead of just a human virus.
Coming quickly!
Get inside! Get inside!
Lock it!
In fact, if one takes into account all the symptoms that people were exhibiting, along with how the disease was passed on, it seems like what we had actually overtaken this little housing community was a mutated and the worst form of rabies. However, the filmmakers had other things in mind, thus adding a supernatural angle to it. The victim also slips into a temporary coma after being bitten or infected while having convulsions and excessive salivation or foamy saliva, similar to a rabies virus. The eyes of the infected are usually blood red or blank white. The infected move swiftly and have little regard for self-preservation, seeking only to spread the illness, and are thus nearly unstoppable without destroying the brain. Because the virus is demonic in origin, it can be kept away using Christian exorcist prayers and religious paraphernalia such as crosses and holy water. With all this in mind, it makes most sense to assume that the demonic enzyme was in fact just a terrible mutating and contagious virus that would turn people into violent, mindless zombies, which is most likely to be a mutated form of rabies. If in fact they have something to do with the supernatural, we may never know. Movies that have come after it and the Hollywood remake have mostly tried to do away with the demonic aspect of it and treat it like a virus, which seems to be more rational and believable. However, this movie suspended your disbelief and accept the story of its demonic origins because it will definitely make it scarier. Tristana Medeiros possessed zombie. Tristana Medeiros, known as La Niña Medeiros in Spanish, is one of the Rec series' two main antagonists. She made her debut in this film and had a larger role in Rec 2 than in Genesis Rec 3. However, the story behind this demonic entity is actually quite a tragic one. Tristana Medeiros was a Portuguese girl who resided in a convent and worked as a cook, before turning into this terrifying monster that we know. Tristana was sexually abused by a gang of priests one night and discovered dead by a nun the next morning. During her vigil, Tristana awoke, reacting angrily to the priest's religious prayers and being bound with ropes on her bed by the nuns. The girl glanced one more time at the inverted cross above her and then closed her eyes, displaying the first signs of demonic possession immediately after opening them. The devil inside Tristana killed the nuns and the priest with the slaying of being beaten on the head with the cross. The nun who found Tristana after the rape managed to calm her down by inserting a sedative into her neck. Tristana, who was possessed, held her under her control with injections and bound to a crucifix until the Vatican priests come, one of which being Father Alberta. The case made news and Tristana was reported missing a short while later. Berta managed to transport Medeiros to a pension building in Barcelona, where the devil was imprisoned in the attic. Alberta, in addition to being a pious man, conducted scientific experiments using Medeiros' blood, using rats and surrounding youngsters as guinea pigs. The studies found that the possession functioned as an infectious sickness, akin to influenza, and Alberta then concluded that he needed to kill the possessed girl, who had transformed into a horrifying creature, in order to prevent a possible contagion. Alberta poisoned Medeiros' food, which was made out of body parts, and served it to her. However, she clearly does not die and instead pursues the priest. He is compelled to climb into an air duct and lock himself inside to die. Medeiros then began living in an apartment, supernaturally confined in the darkness, until a young woman named Angela Vidal entered the room looking for a place to hide. This unleashed her upon mankind once again, and if you want to see more of her, although I don't know why one would, then you should also check out the sequels of this movie. Why should you watch Rec? Rec organizes the plot in such a way that zones of risks and relief may be practically linked to the structure of the building. The video becomes increasingly claustrophobic and outrageously chaotic as the plot develops, with residents turning on each other in their panic. However, rather than being a jumbled mess, Rec stays a thrilling trip from start to finish. It does such a superb job of establishing plot strands and the actual location of persons and spaces that even with the camera bouncing blurry from side to side, what is happening is crystal clear. This is a massive plus point with regards to the movie and draws the viewer into the tense environment. Rec's hallmark technique is to position the viewers firmly in the heart of the action. Directors Jaume Balagueró and Paco Plaza have stated they intended to do so that the picture feels like it was happening live. The audience is transported through the scenario, whether willingly or unwillingly, as seen in Pablo's eyes, or rather his camera, making the whole thing feel like the scariest theme park ride you've ever been on. The ending, in true found footage movie fashion, does not satisfy on any emotional level, but it doesn't need to because it does such an excellent job scaring the bejesus out of us. The enthusiasm helps moviegoers to overlook any problems in the film's non-existent character creation and be immersed in a horrific setting, expertly produced. This movie is high on our must-watch list, so definitely check it out. It is hands down one of the best movies in the found footage genre, and I doubt we'll see something of this caliber come out of this genre ever again. Thank you for watching another exciting episode of Marvelous Videos. I'm your host, Tia Aya.